The transfer of the mining lease from BHP to the Newcastle Coal Company has been frozen because of the dispute. The owner-to-be, a subsidiary of Pico Wallsend, wants the mining unions to accept changes in their working conditions. The unions say no. Because of the dispute, the state government has not formally endorsed the transfer, and BHP remains the owner and employer at the mine. The personnel manager of BHP's Colliery Division, Alan Priestley, says that while the dispute is being resolved, work should continue as usual. Men who were scheduled to transfer to the Newcastle Coal Company should report for work tonight and tomorrow. Last Friday, 12 employees were paid in lieu of notice to meet the prospective owner's staffing requirements. The unions indicated if those men couldn't work, no one would work. BHP has avoided a confrontation by saying the retrenched men can report to the mine and work out their notice. However, they must return all termination money to BHP.
It was all smiles for Leader and Tim Snell today as they checked on the progress of 5-day-old Kurri at Newcastle's Mater Hospital. But it was a different story last Sunday when Leader's water broke in the 32nd week of her pregnancy. She was rushed from her Safala property in the Central West to Bathurst Hospital, only to be transported to the neonatal intensive care ward at Sydney's Westmead. The drama continued when Mrs Snell was told there were no spare cots for her 7-week-old premature baby. She was finally brought to the Mater Hospital. Sparking off the political furore, the Snells were greeted with a bedside visit by State Minister for Health Peter Anderson, disputing allegations
was prescribed under the guidelines and in the normal course of events.
Early Thursday morning, the 35-year-old mother gave birth to their only daughter. Although weighing a tiny 1.8 kilograms, she's since made excellent progress. The Snells plan to return to their property tomorrow. Kurri will continue to be kept under close observation by air ambulance.
The community of Rathmines on the shores of Lake Macquarie became involved with the Coe's plight in March last year, when David Coe lost his court battle to remain in Australia. David, his wife Mary and daughter Elaine came to Australia some 5 years ago on a tourist visa, but stayed on, having another daughter Amy, and buying a restaurant and a house after the visa had expired. On June 21st last year, immigration officials swept on the Coe home and seemingly spirited the family away, leaving signs of their sudden departure in their wake. The community of Rathmines banded together to help the Coes, angry at the way they'd been deported and determined to beat the system and bring them back.
Well, we approached directly the federal government, following advice from our federal minister, Bob Brown, in suggesting that we approach the minister only in an attempt to keep them here. Then following after their departure, the federal government again to get them back.
The people of Rathmines' commitment and willingness to help the Coes has been mentioned in high places. Recently the committee received a letter from Prime Minister Hawke commending them on their community spirit and congratulating them on winning the battle to bring the Coes back to Australia. All this pressure has worked, and the usual exclusion period for deportees of 5 years was reduced to 1. In the meantime, the Coes' friends have listed a house and restaurant, knowing they'd need them when they return. The family collected their visas today, and they're due to fly into Sydney tomorrow morning, and then home to Rathmines.
We'll be having a get-together with the close friends, and then on this Sunday coming, 28th, there's an open invitation to anybody who wants to come. All those who have helped, anybody who's signed petitions or anybody who feels they would like to come along, it'll be on Sunday from 12 to 1 o'clock onward at Rathmines Park.
Addards, as the support group is known, has branches throughout the state. Members of the Toronto group gathered at Booragul today to meet with state organiser Bob Price. He says the disease is largely misunderstood by many sectors of the community. Although elderly people are usually affected, the cause is not known. The disease is not infectious and is not believed to be hereditary. Mr Price says proper assessment is essential, as there are many forms of dementia that can be treated. He says the families of sufferers can benefit from Addard support groups, as the symptoms can be hard to cope with.
It's a terrible burden that many of them have, caring for someone who's confused and has terrible deficiency of memory, wanders at night, misplaces objects, repeats questions incessantly, has lost basic hygiene habits. And many people find that their caring role can just get on top of them unless they have the opportunity to ventilate and share their experiences with people who understand.
Although happy to be back on Australian shores after their arrival at Mascot this morning, the Coes were no doubt confused by the media attention they've aroused. The reason for the tussle was that the Coes had sold their story to the Mike Willesee program, and the opposition networks weren't willing to miss out. The scene as they arrived by helicopter in their beloved Rathmines was similar, with crews scrambling for a shot of David, his wife Mary and daughters Elaine and Amy as they were reunited with family and friends. One of the tireless workers for the Coes' return was fellow shopkeeper Bill Ware.
Fabulous, very good. We're all very pleased. Actually, I'm almost in tears myself. I noticed Ollie Parkinson was crying there, so it's great.
After the dramatic arrival, it was back to meet with friends who had worked so hard to ensure they could return to their life in Australia.
God bless you. Welcome home.
David Coe says he's deeply grateful to all those who have helped. And he says he's looking forward to becoming an Aussie.
I mean, this sort of result or this sort of support, you can't get from any other place except in Australia.
But perhaps 9-year-old Elaine best summed up the family's feelings on being allowed to return after just 1 year instead of 5.
I'm very happy to come back, and that I'm glad to see you all again.
Going to say that.
We've got a show that's going on this weekend that's going to be very spectacular. We've got 67 vehicles racing of every conceivable type, from this big truck type down to the little tube frame buggies. Neville Boys, the current Australian champion and one of the local lads, is competing here over the weekend. It's a 2-day event, commencing 1:30 on Saturday and commencing at 9 o'clock on Sunday morning. We've also got a natural grandstand and spectator lookout on top of one of the hills directly behind us here that you can see 2/3 of the entire 16-kilometre course. So people would have an excellent view of the circuit and the activities that are going on.
You've livened up this little valley up here. They've never seen vehicles like this, nor fellows that drive them well, as crazily as you fellas.
Well, we are, I think, one of the requirements to leave the brain in the bucket before you get into the motor car, like most motor racing, but off-road racing is a little more spectacular than most because you've got vehicles going in every conceivable direction and nobody seems to be pointing the same way at any one time. So a great spectacle for the valley. They're going to enjoy it.
For
For the 20 long-term residents of the Caravan Park, today's news will come as a welcome reprieve. Newcastle City Aldermen, including the Lord Mayor John McNaughton, had said the park must be cleared of vans for an upgrading period, following which only tourists would be allowed back in. When this became public, it caused an uproar, and Trades Hall Council said that it would oppose any eviction of the residents. The final date for leaving was today, and in a dramatic reversal, the Lord Mayor has now announced that in fact the bona fide residents will be allowed to stay, even while the park is upgraded. He denies that the turnaround has anything to do with public pressure, saying that legal reasons to do with the transfer of the park from the lessee to the council meant they could do nothing to officially reassure the residents. He also said that any statements given by the alderman previously were simply personal opinions.
To be disregarded?
The council made no announcements at all in the past because it was a confidential matter, and that's what's caused all the problem. There's been a lot of personal opinions stated, and a lot of things have had to be said because of the legal position that the council was in. And the arrangements are now that the council is in control, and the council can now make statements. Incidentally, my statements today are simply my own opinions. They're not opinions of the council.
The Lord Mayor says the council acted in the only way it could, and says the matter was much worsened by aldermen breaking confidentiality of the original meeting.
Jeff Patrick and his family have been breeding cashmere goats on their property at Rothbury since 1981. They have 1,000 animals, grazing on 220 hectares. At the moment, China produces 80% of the world's cashmere. That's about 4,000 of the 5,000-tonne yearly clip. Australia, in comparison, produced about 40 tonnes of cashmere in 1986. The Australian Cashmere Growers Association wants that situation changed. According to Jeff Patrick, more farmers could take advantage of the lucrative cashmere market.
Cashmere's, I guess, really got the greatest potential in primary industry in Australia. We've got a market which is probably only getting about no more than 25 to 50% of its requirements, and it's grown in one small area in the world. Australia is proving that it can grow good quality cashmere. So it's purely a function of Australians starting to utilise our stock and get into the game.
And what are you trying to do here at Patdale?
Well, what we're doing is we're basically trying to produce good quality animals to provide bucks for the industry, basically, I guess, and to produce good volumes of fleece so that it can be shown that they are commercial. Well, it actually is shown. We are actually producing good volumes of fleece already, but probably over the next 10 or 15 years we hope to produce probably 3 times the volume that we're producing now per animal.
Degree, and there's two
Last night, the Newcastle Hunter Region Australia Day Council said thanks to the many sponsors and patrons that have supported the organisation over the years. Well-known sporting figures such as patrons Mark Richards and Greg Hayman, local business people and politicians were congratulated on their efforts and were informed of next year's plans marking our 200th birthday. Beginning on January the 17th, it'll be a big week of celebrations, starting with a giant children's breakfast at Blackbutt Reserve and culminating on Australia Day with the reenactment of Captain Phillip's Landing. Newcastle was the only city in the state to establish its own Australia Day Council back in 1966, and now there's another first for the region, with the announcement of the only Youth Australia Day Council in the country. According to Vice President and Honorary Chairperson of the Youth Council, Adele Thornton, local young people will be encouraged to offer ideas for next year's bicentennial birthday party.
Well, we formed the Youth Australia Day Council because we believe our youth are our most important resource in this country, and if we can get our youth to love their country the way we were brought up to love it, it'll be a lot better place in future.
It is the greatest joke in the world to hear about mudslinging from Hawke and Keating in Parliament, two of the nastiest, dirtiest mudslingers you get. Throw abuse at us all the time. And just because we dare question Mr Keating's travel allowance, or the fact that he didn't put in his tax return, which are perfectly legitimate subjects of public questioning, they call that mudslinging.
While addressing a group of business people in Raymond Terrace this afternoon, Mr Carlton said reaction to the Liberals' tax policy had been favourable. He says most people believe that we have too much government and they look forward to a reduction in income tax that the cuts will bring. Mr Carlton also defended his leader John Howard over the allegations that his 3 cents on the dollar cut of government expenditure was actually 10 cents over 3 years.
Every time we put out something in a very forthright way, the Labor Party says we're deceptive, and yet if you look at our documents and everything we say, they're absolutely crystal clear, unlike the stuff that the Labor Party is putting out.
The 3642 pulled into Newcastle with 300 people on board, including First Fleet organisers, school children and even stars of Silver's Circus. Wally Franklin from the First Fleet project says the train's arrival is the first of many activities for the region up until the arrival of the First Fleet in Newcastle in April next year.
Well, the idea is that this is a train bearing goodwill from the First Fleet Festival, which is developing around Botany Bay in Sydney, and on board the train we have children from the First Fleet Festival coming up on this, the First Fleet of the Land, which the train has been called and which has kindly been donated by the State Rail Authority, and those children are bringing goodwill in the form of seeds which will be handed on to children here in the Hunter Valley. This is all to do with the arrival of the fleet in Botany Bay in 1988. The reenactment voyage, as you well know, is on the way from England. They're now approaching Brazil. They're due in Botany Bay in January. And a very large community festival is developing around the arrival of the fleet, and that festival is spreading to other parts of the country. And this trip today is part of that process of bringing the word out about the arrival of the fleet to the rest of the community.
Charlton, which encompasses an area from Kurri down to Morisset, then through Toronto to Cardiff, was a new seat in 1984. It was won by the Labor Party's Bob Brown with a 17% majority. Since then, the roll has increased 2,500 to 68,500 voters. Australian Democrat Lynn Godfrey's name appears at the top of the ballot paper. Mr Godfrey is a 44-year-old industrial chemist at the Sulphide Corporation. He is married with 2 children and lives at Valentine. Lynn Godfrey is involved in various community organisations and has been a member of the Australian Democrats since their inception, contesting many elections in that time.
I'm not going to insult the viewers' intelligence by saying when I win I'll do this, because unless something dramatic happens, the Labor Party will outpoll all the other candidates by 2 to 1.
And so, why stand?
Well, to give the voters the choice, to get the upper house vote, to get our senator in, and this is the best time we have to publicise what we stand for.
Which is what?
Well, basically keeping them honest.
Charlton is a 4-way contest with an independent Vishnu Chowdhury occupying 2nd place on the ballot. Mr Chowdhury is a pharmacist at Bolton Point. He was born in Fiji of Indian parents 47 years ago and studied pharmacy at Sydney University.
Well, the people of Australia are getting very disillusioned with the parties in Canberra. So the people of Charlton have approached me to stand as an independent and not to be tied down to the party machines and be dictated to. So I have this with all my political experience. I think I can do justice to them. That's why I have asked the people of Charlton to vote in independent and carry their voice through into Parliament.
It would indeed be a shock to many people, particularly the sitting ALP member Bob Brown, if the seat changes hands on Saturday week. This will be his 4th federal term, being elected first to the seat of Hunter in 1980. Bob Brown is 53 and lives at Kurri. He's a former Cessnock mayor and a former high school teacher. Mr Brown says the worst is over and now Australia needs the Hawke government to build on the initiatives which have already been started.
Well, things have been grim, but I think now, Ray, the point has been made, and I think made more than adequately by the Prime Minister and by other major spokesmen of the government, that as far as we're concerned, most of the hard decisions now have been made. The Australian people generally have been asked to make the sort of sacrifices that were necessary to turn the economy around. And I think the evidence is there. We inherited, as you know, an economy which was falling apart. There were another 250,000 people who were unemployed in the last year of the Fraser government. You know, in the time that's been available to us, we've now created almost 800,000 new jobs. Now, for a government to bring about that turnaround has been nothing short of remarkable, by any measure, by any measure.
And to the final candidate on the Charlton ballot paper, Molly Blake. Mrs Blake is a widow with 2 married daughters and grandmother to 4. Since retiring from the Education Department as a secretary 4 years ago, Molly Blake, JP, has devoted much of her time to community organisations. Of the 68,000 voters, she hopes to contact 2/3 of them through a letterbox campaign involving a team of helpers, with the message, Australia is a wonderful country.
Well, I just feel that people should vote for me. Our policies are entirely different to the present government. We've gone down the drain over the last 4 years with that government. There have been many occasions that we feel they've sold us out. Our country, to start off with, is so in debt to foreign moneylenders. There are just so many things like hospitals, small businesses, families, all kinds of things like that, Ray, that I think we should try and better.
That's our final electorate report for this week. Monday to Thursday of next week, we look at the other 4 seats in our viewing area: Shortland, Lyne, Newcastle and Hunter.